With the end of the NFL season nearly upon us, teams are getting ready to embark on the annual purge of underperforming coaches. Because of this, the Monday following the last weekend of games of the regular season has come to be called Black Monday. The Monday when those coaches who didn't make the cut find out that they're going to have to move on. In this video, I'm going to rank the current slate of NFL head coaches based on their job security and talk about those coaches that are most likely to get fired on Black Monday, if not sooner. Now, first, we have to acknowledge that there were two coaches who were fired mid-season, both due to issues that occurred either behind closed doors or off the field. First was John Gruden, and we all know what happened with the emails. That story has been well documented. Gruden was then followed by Jacksonville Jaguars coach Urban Meyer, who was also fired under some well-documented circumstances. It's highly unlikely that either of the interim coaches in these situations are going to be brought back, so these both should be considered open jobs right now. So without further ado, let's get into the first tier in terms of job security, which I call only if there's a scandal or they retire. This tier includes those coaches who have been so successful over the long term or recently that the only way they're leaving is if there's some sort of scandal like we saw with Gruden or Meyer, or for some reason they decided to retire. But aside from that, these coaches are staying put. This tier includes Sean McVay, Bruce Arians, Matt LaFleur, Bill Belichick, and Andy Reid. The next tier is a group of coaches that I don't expect to see going anywhere either, and I call this tier they should be safe. These are coaches who've had recent success, but maybe not quite at the level of the coaches in the previous tier, or they don't have the same track record to keep them safe. This includes Cliff Kingsbury, Zach Taylor, Frank Reich, Mike McCarthy, Mike Vrabel, and Sean McDermott. Some of these coaches are probably safer than others. I think McDermott and Vrabel are probably the two safest on this list, and Frank Reich might be the most vulnerable in terms of his job security. But I'd be surprised if any of these coaches are fired this year. The next tier is what I'm calling promising new coaches. These are coaches who are in their first year and have performed well enough that there's reason to believe they have a bright future in this league. This includes Nick Sirianni, Brandon Staley, and Arthur Smith. All three of these coaches have done enough with their teams to give their fan bases reason to believe they have bright futures. Sirianni and Smith in particular have done so under difficult circumstances with rosters that people did not expect to be competitive right away. Sirianni has led the Eagles to a playoff berth, and Brandon Staley's Chargers are still in contention in the AFC. Arthur Smith and the Falcons have been eliminated from the playoffs already, but many people didn't expect his team to win 7 games this year. The next tier is one I'm calling shielded by long-term success. These are coaches who haven't had their best season, but they have enough of a track record that they're probably going to be safe. This includes Mike Tomlin, Sean Payton, John Harbaugh, and Ron Rivera. Now, it is possible that one or more of these coaches would get fired, and if I had to guess which one is most likely to lose his job, it's probably John Harbaugh. But I think they're probably all going to be safe. All 4 of these coaches have the kind of track record that has earned them another chance despite the disappointing season they've had this year. This next tier of coaches I'm calling probably a year away. Now, the question is, a year away from what? These are coaches who are either one bad year away from being on the hot seat or one good year from turning their teams around. All 3 of these teams have not lived up to expectations, but all 3 of these coaches have been thought of as promising. This includes Kevin Stefanski, Brian Flores, and Kyle Shanahan. This next tier is what I'm calling first year mulligan. These are coaches who are in their first year, but their teams have struggled mightily. But typically, coaches in this situation get at least one more season to show what they can do. This list includes Robert Saleh, David Culley, and Dan Campbell. Now, any one of these 3 coaches could be fired. It's not unheard of. And there are rumblings that David Culley might be on the hot seat. So it's absolutely possible that one of these coaches does get fired, but historically coaches in this situation usually do get one more chance. Now we get to the next tier, and this is a tier that's one man unto himself, Pete Carroll. That's it. That's the tier. Under normal circumstances, I would have put Pete Carroll in that tier of coaches whose past success is going to shield them from losing their job. But the Russell Wilson saga might end up being Pete Carroll's undoing. There have been rumblings that Russell Wilson is unhappy with the situation in Seattle, and if the ownership is put in a situation where they have to choose between Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll, who's one of the older coaches in the NFL, there's a high likelihood that the Seahawks are going to choose Wilson. But this is a tough situation. With the long tenure he's he's had there and the success that he's had, it's hard to see the Seahawks simply firing Pete Carroll. Of all the situations, this is the one that I think is most likely to end either in the coach retiring or some sort of situation where the team and the coach both come out and say, we've mutually agreed that it's time for a change of scenery. Really a softer way to fire the coach. This is really a tough one to read, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Now we get to the coaches who I think are legitimately and fully on the hot seat. I'm going to go through these coaches in order of least likely to get fired through most likely to get fired based on what I've seen and heard. First is Joe Judge. Joe Judge is in his second season with the New York Giants and has a career record of 10-22. His tenure has been very disappointing thus far, and really the only reason I have him as the least likely to be fired of those who are on the hot seat is because there are some reports coming out of New York that they plan to give him another year. It's possible those reports aren't accurate, so we'll see. But based on his performance, he deserves to be firmly on the hot seat. Next is Coach Mike Zimmer of the Minnesota Vikings. Of the coaches on the hot seat, Zimmer is the one who has had the most success throughout his career. He has a regular season record of 71-56-1 and has taken the Vikings to the playoffs. But the team has disappointed recently, and there are many who think he could be let go. It is possible he gets another chance, which is why he is this far up on the list, but make no mistake, he is firmly on the hot seat. The next coach is Vic Fanglo of the Denver Broncos. Fangio is a well-respected defensive coach who's been around the league for a long time, but his tenure in Denver has not been successful. He has a record of 19-29, and the team has failed to make the playoffs in any of his 3 seasons. It is possible he gets another chance because of how well respected he is, but the odds are he's probably going to be fired. Next is Coach Matt Rule of the Carolina Panthers. Rule has gone 10-22 in his time with the Panthers, which is disappointing enough. But when you add to that the fact that the Panthers started out very strong this year, going 3-0 to start the season, and then went on to only win 5 games, with a 6-game losing streak going into the final week of the season, Matt Rule is likely out in Carolina. There is a possibility they give him 1 more year, but I wouldn't bet on it. Finally, we get to Matt Nagy, the coach that I think is most likely to be fired. Nagy does actually have a winning record in his time with Chicago, going 34-30 over 4 seasons. But after going 12-4 in his first season and finishing first in the NFC North, he's gone 8-8, 8-8, and now 6-10. There were even reports that Nagy might have been fired a few weeks ago, mid-season. Now that didn't happen, but all indications suggest that he is on his way out in Chicago. So what do you think about these tiers? Do you think there's any coaches that maybe belonged in a different tier than I put them in? Let me know in the comments below. Also, please be sure to click like on this video and subscribe to my channel for more content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Cardinal Rule.